All right, now, Tom Kelly. He's a globally recognized expert on Industry 4.0 and its impact on business. As Executive Director and CEO of Automation Alley, which is a Michigan-based nonprofit industry 4.0 knowledge center with a global outlook and a regional focus. Tom is often tapped to share his visionary leadership and expertise around digital transformation. As the Executive Director and CEO, Tom's been instrumental to the success of Automation Alley's Industry 4.0 initiatives, designed to help businesses jumpstart or accelerate a digital path to strategic success, including Integrate 8 at the end, the Global Industry 4.0 Conference, and the 3D Printing Network Project Diamond, and you'll hear more about that today, and the formation of the World Economic Forum's U.S. Center for Advanced Manufacturing. Tom serves on the World Economic Forum's Global Futures Council for Advanced Manufacturing and Supply Chains. He's a member of the Additive Manufacturing Coalition Steering Committee and is a board member of the, is that Fraunhofer? Fraunhofer Technology Advisory Board, Global Future Council on Advanced Manufacturing and Value Chains, and Michigan Manufacturing Technology Center. So you see, he knows a little bit about what he's going to talk about today. So we really want to bring him up. And you know, one of the neat comments at the table that was made is when we were talking about the importance of this, Cindy Kaga said a lot of people don't know how much they need to know this. And I think that's really important for all of us. So with that, let me bring Tom Kelly, CEO of Automation Alley.
Let me just take the microphone this way so I can move around, because I like to move around. So I'm happy to be here. When Chris asked me to come and speak, I said, did all your A players decline? And that's why you're reaching out? And quite frankly, he said yes, but I still agreed to help him. Anyway, I'm happy to be here. I love speaking on this topic. Cindy's here. We're partners in crime together, trying to get the word out. If you're not familiar with Cindy and her group up here in Lansing, by all means, reach out to her, Capital Area Manufacturers Association. Next slide, Chris. So this is a little bio on me. It's in your packet. If you ever need to get a hold of me, I'm happy to talk to anybody about this topic at any time. Next slide. A little background on Automation Alley, just set the stage. For those of you who don't know, we are Michigan's Digital Transformation Insight Center. We are partnered with the Governor's Office and the MEDC to make sure that every manufacturer in the state of Michigan understands the coming change digitally that is going to happen to manufacturing. And we're going to talk through some examples of what we're seeing. We have 3,500 members throughout the state. 3,100 are small manufacturers. When I say small, I mean probably under 10 million members. And those are the ones we want to reach. So there's about 12,000 manufacturers registered in the state. So we have about a quarter of them. You would think, by far we're the largest in the state, by the way, in terms of membership for manufacturing. We work with Cindy's group. Anybody who's a member of Cindy's group is a member of Automation Alley. That can be viewed as a positive. I view it as a deep, deep negative. Because that means a whole lot of manufacturers are not paying attention. Because membership, if you're small in Automation Alley, is free. And so even with that, they're too busy to pay attention to what are existential threats to their business. And we know that manufacturing at the small level is going to be deeply challenged. We just want Michigan to survive, right? That's our goal, make sure our Michigan supply chain survives. That's why we stood up the U.S. Center for Advanced Manufacturing in partnership with the World Economic Forum. The reason why we did that, one, they had faith in us. This is the U.S. Center for Advanced Manufacturing. It represents all of the United States in partnership with the World Economic Forum. Whether you love or hate the politics of it all, which gets polarized crazy, that's where the bigs go to talk about policy every year. And if Michigan is the only state at the table in the room, that's a win for Michigan. And that's why we did that. Because believe me, we get a lot of political pushback on both sides. Well, what the hell are you doing there? But that's why, because we want to sit at the table to drive those nationals not to Texas, not to Georgia, not to all the places that you read about, but back to Michigan. We got to start winning And then we have a group called Project Diamond. Project Diamond is a network we set up in Oakland and Macomb County with 300 small manufacturers, each one of them with an additive manufacturing, a printer, 3D printing asset. And we've stitched them all together with software that allows them to behave as a large manufacturer. Think about being able to make something where I can make something 300 at a time without any additional capital assets to make 300 at a time. So I can make one when I want to, I can make 300 when I want to. We've been refunded, we're on our way to having 600 to 700 manufacturers on the network and being able to be in a position where we can do metal, we can do plastic, we can do injection molding, competitive parts. That is going to change everything, and that we're going to talk about how that's going to impact manufacturing. Because most people believe manufacturing is, I need to understand process. I need to understand how this machine, and 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 this machine, you get my point? On and on to make a finished part. And it's in that knowledge of how all those machines stitch together that creates value. And I'm here to tell you that all of that's going to be handled by computers. In fact, additive manufacturing is that. Additive manufacturing says, if the computer says I can make it, oh, it's made. It's made. There is no manufacturing knowledge required anymore. Now it becomes an economy of scale model. So let's go to the next slide, Chris. So what do we believe at Automation Alley? We believe manufacturing is going to go software first. That means that everything you do has to be designed digitally and be able to be made digitally. You may still make it in a high volume process, but so many manufacturers that we talk to around the state, their drawings are still in 2D. Some of them, their drawings are still on paper. Literally on paper in a 2D flat file format. They have no capability digitally. And yet we're saying, but this is the future. How are you possibly going to keep up with what people upstream to you want if you don't understand the digital world as it's coming? We also think additive is going to play a much, much, much bigger role going forward. You're seeing it nip at the heels of traditional high-volume manufacturing. And right now it's scooping up all the low-volume, high-value stuff. Take aerospace, right? Additive has made a huge run in aerospace. But that's just because they start at the high-value, low-volume stuff, and you're going to see that curve come down. The only thing holding back additive is the material cost is too high, right? And the speed is too low. And both those things are going to get solved. Because that's what technology does. It goes down and to the left in terms of cost. Always. Always. And we tend to get focused in our mind that the world as it is today is what I'm competing against. And that's actually never the case. The world as it will be is what you're competing against. And manufacturers sometimes lose sight of that. That it's not the order you're taking today from GM, if you're down in my area of the woods. It's the order GM's not going to give you tomorrow because you're not ready to take the digital order. Next slide. And by the way, we'll get back to distributed manufacturing. I'll talk about how additive will enable that. So, software first mindset. We're going to move from process to intellectual property. I talked about putting all the machines together to make a lot of something. That's process knowledge. Michigan is better than anyone in the world at process knowledge. Hands down. What concerns us at Automation Alley is that's not what's going to be valued in the future. What's going to be valued in the future is your design know-how, your ability to iterate. We're going to show a company called Relativity Space, which is making 3D printed rockets. They made 53 rockets, not a single one the same, right? And we'll talk about how in the rocket industry it takes 4 years to make a change. They printed 53 rockets in like 6-7 months. And they're all different, right? We're going to talk about that. So the business models are changing rapidly. AI is leading the way. And by the way, we were talking about this before ChatGPT came out and sort of made the whole world sit up and take notice and say, wait, what just happened? What just happened? There's like a step change. And consumers, the great test of technology is when you don't have to provide any training to anybody to use it. And everybody in the world also went, hey, I can ask ChatGPT a question. It actually gives me an answer. Right? Big threat to Google, by the way. Google is, I put a question into Google, it gives me 10 blue links and good luck. And then you got to figure out how to be your own editor and navigate through it. ChatGPT just gives you the answer. Right? Now sometimes it gives you the wrong answer, but there's ways to fix that, and they're working on that. And when you look at the pace of change, and the fact that yes, consumers will drive that adoption, but what's happening behind the scenes is OpenAI and Google and Meta and Apple, they're all working on the models. Anthropic, they're all working on models to do the heavy engineering AI, right? There's AI that's large language models that helps you put words together in a way that is perceived as contextual for the human. It's just putting words together, and you go, oh my God, that thing can write poetry. No, you decided it was poetry. The computer never decided it was poetry. You thought it was. But the computer also is really capable of doing heavy maths. Because that's indisputable. That's just physics. That's math. There is only one right answer. And that's what's coming. And that's going to drive everything in manufacturing going forward. Uber. If I take you back to the days of before Uber, and a taxi company, I said, hey, there's going to be something's going to put you out of business, going to knock you back on your heels. How could they do that? They got to buy all the cars. Then they got to hire all the employees. Then they got to train all those employees. Then they got to put them on, then they got to work out schedules. They got to pay for health insurance. And Uber said, no, it's a software play. I'm going to rent the car and the person. And I'm just going to match buyer and seller up. And that's all I'm going to do. I have no assets whatsoever. I have a guaranteed profit model once I get my software built, because I just take a margin on whatever the transaction was decided to be at that moment. Netflix, same thing. Amazon, Tesla, these are all examples where the industries themselves totally discounted what was possible, because the industry itself couldn't disrupt itself. Right? It's like the taxi company. How in the world are they going to pay for all those taxis? Never thinking that there's an entirely different business model that is coming. And not able to see it. And that's what we're trying to say to our manufacturers. If you have a huge blind spot, if you can't envision a world where manufacturing will be distributed, and your neighbors will be making things with you, and you'll be sharing margin, the Uberization of manufacturing, I'm here to tell you, you are at great risk. Let's go to the next slide. So 3D printing additive. We believe manufacturing business models are ripe for rapid change. We just talked about this. So, if you are a manufacturer in this room, or you know a manufacturer, what we say is you need to move from design for manufacturing. When I came out of school, as an electrical engineer, went into manufacturing, went into factory automation, and back in the day, you had design engineers that would design the product. Whatever you want it to be. It could be a car, it could be something less sophisticated, it could be just single part. But then the design engineer team would throw it over the wall to the manufacturing engineers. And then they would redesign it for manufacturability, right? Everybody who's been in manufacturing knows how this works. And the two products did not coalesce. They were different. The binders that the engineers had for design were different than the binders that the manufacturers had, and that were making the part. And that's design for manufacturing, where you have to take what was ideal that the consumer would want and re-mash it into a form that actually could be made, whether the consumer wanted it or not. It didn't matter, because you got to make it in that. We're coming into a future now where you have to design for additive manufacturing, which is totally different, because you're unconstrained by the design process, by the manufacturing process, right? If the computer says you can make it, and we have lots of examples of little companies that are on Project Diamond, that one guy makes manifolds. He used to have to drill them out of aluminum block, right? And you can only make right angles with a CNC machine. Well, now he uses his 3D printer, and he makes them in carbon fiber reinforced, just as strong as aluminum, And he can make bends, which increases the efficiency and flow of that material. And he makes better manifolds now than ever. And quite frankly, guess what? He can produce anything the customer wants because he can push a button and overnight it makes the manifold and out the door it goes. So it's really powerful. A couple thought experiments I want to give you guys. And I want to keep track, so we're going to have to fly through this material. I'm sorry that we got so much. New York Times, we've been talking for a long time that energy is going to trend to free. If you're a manufacturer, energy is one of your largest input costs. And we're thinking about energy as a population all wrong today. So solar energy and wind energy is different than any energy we've done to date. Because energy that we've always consumed had to be pulled out of the ground in some fashion, and there was a variable cost as you consumed it. Once you put a solar farm in, yeah, there's a capital cost to put it in. But for the next 25 or 30 years, that power is free. The sun is going to shine, and it's going to make that electricity, and there's nothing left for you to do except very, very small routine maintenance, right? And you probably wouldn't even have to do that if you wanted to. It'll just generate power. The New York Times just had an article last week that said, solar power is going to make energy in America trend to free. We have to rethink everything we know about what we thought was a scarce resource that will become an abundant resource. And by the way, in Texas, this summer, they had negative feed-in tariffs. You know why? Because electricity, if you generate it, you must buy in a home for it. It must be consumed. And I won't get into all the physics of why that is, but it must be consumed. Therefore, your marginal customer, I can't shut the grid down to protect it because I have customers that are all relying on it. So I have to pay the marginal customer to come on. So we're paying people to start their air conditioner. No joke. Right? This is the whole, how do we get our head around this, right? If you're a manufacturer, you need to pay attention to this stuff. Like, maybe I put solar on the roof of my manufacturer, I take the cost today as a cash charge because I have the money, but then my input cost on a cash basis for the next 20 years is zero. That's really, really, really attractive. Not to mention that I can write it up. So anyway, what happens when the marginal cost of energy trends are free? Let's keep going. Distributed manufacturing. So, I said, if you trend a computer and AI, and you start to design for additive, what does that mean? If I can push a button and make it at my factory, then I can push it, and I'm in Detroit, then I can push a button and I can make it in Mumbai, and I can make it in Indiana, and I can make it in Georgia, and I can make it in LA, and I can make it anywhere. Because those printers are all the same. Manufacturing used to be a know-how business in that nobody can replicate how my machines go together to make that part and to make the quality. With additive, all of that is gone. I push a button, and as long as you have the same machine I have, you can make exactly what I make. That's why the world is going to become an IP game, where I have to own my intellectual property. If I'm an order taker for someone upstream, and they own the intellectual property, we're in trouble. Because as they go to additive, it's going to be problematic. So let's keep going, if we could, Jeff. So this is a one-year-old chart. I put this up last year and said, if anybody doesn't believe that manufacturing is reshoring, here's a chart that'll prove that it is. And by the way, I didn't plan this. In the Wall Street Journal today is an update to this chart. And it goes out another 6 months, and it shows that curve going down and then up again. So it is going bonkers. It's going bonkers, and it's going to affect a lot. Now, what deeply troubles me is it tends to be going bonkers in Texas, in Georgia, in Tennessee, in places that we don't want it going bonkers. We need it going crazy in Michigan. And we have some, unfortunately, deep competitive issues that make multinational manufacturers think twice about coming here. And we need to ask ourselves, do we want to win the battle as it's playing out right now? Because you can't, in hindsight, go, we probably shouldn't have done that policy. You think? Doesn't matter, it's too late. Decisions are being made right now because this money is being spent. Let's keep going. So this is a McLaren Senna. Fastest car in the world, Laguna Seca lap time was 1:27.62. Let's go to the next slide. This is a Zinger 21C. Kevin Zinger sits on our U.S. Center for Advanced Manufacturing Board. Additive manufacturing car. Fastest in the world. It beat, it's now not anymore, I think it's been beat again many times over, but at the time when they put this out, it was the world record holder. Except for the panels, the glass, the panels, and the engine, it's all 3D printed. Let's go to the next car. 350 components. Every component you see there is 3D printed. This is what I'm talking about. GM, Cadillac, announced their Celestique, and they announced that 350 components on the Celestique would be additively printed. This represents what 350 components look like. It's not like, oh yeah, some components, it's a lot of the car. Now, I happen to know the guys at GM that work directly on that, and they're only going to get to about 110 on this iteration. They just could not get over the hurdle for the other 200. But let me tell you, they're looking at the next 200. And what is GM doing? They're learning. They're teaching themselves, how do we do additive? Because I would much rather print that, try and get the cost down, because guess what? A lot of my cost in automotive is trying to maintain parts for the next 12 years, the next 15 years. You have to maintain all these vehicles. Wouldn't it be great that I have no cost of inventory? Zero. Maybe you will print the part at your own dealership when you need it. Think about how efficient that world would be, right? So it doesn't matter if the part costs 2 or 3x what it would cost to make at GM, because by the time you get it through the system, the reason why the part costs 20x from what GM made it for is because you got to fit in all the costs of the inefficiency. So when people talk, oh, that material, that costs 3 times as much to make as for me to make it on. Not when you take in all the costs. You got to be very careful. Let's keep going. So here's the rocket company I'm talking about. We follow these guys. Tim Ellis and I are on a committee at the forum. Years ago when I first met him, he had raised $2 million. He's worth $6 billion today, by the way. $2 million from Jeff Bezos. I said, what are you trying to do? He said, I'm trying to 3D print a rocket. I said, good luck with that. Well, he's done it. So, by the way, he doesn't talk to me anymore. I invited him to our Integrate conference. He won't return my calls anymore because he's worth $6 billion, right? It doesn't need to be associated with the likes of Chris and I anymore. So a traditional rocket takes 100,000 parts, 24 months to build, 48-month iteration time. Means if I make a design change, it takes 48 months to retool everything. Those have come down some in the last couple of years because of the aggressive change that's happening. And the global supply chain dependent on geopolitical risks, i.e. like Russian rockets and things. Let's go to the next slide. So this rocket, by the way, I'm not kidding you. This entire rocket is 3D printed. The entire fuselage. No thicker than a Pepsi can, by the way. When it's made warped because when it cools, and guess what? No human could ever do it. The computer figures out how to build it so that when it cools, it forms a perfect cylinder. Because if you built it at a perfect cylinder and it cooled, it would be warped. Isn't that bizarre? But that's what computers do. No humans could be involved in this process. But now he's got less than 1,000 parts from 100,000. That's 100x reduction in parts. Why? Because when you do traditional manufacturing, you have to braze every single one of those cooling tubes around every single flare that they have. Now it's just the whole engine is 3D printed in one go. One part. All the internals, all the externals, everything. It's all done. So let's go on. These are just thought experiments for a motor company. So we're building Project Diamond, right? It says, hey, we got 300 manufacturers and we need anything. Ford is putting in 35 Mark Forge printers. By the way, the same printers we have on Project Diamond. Because they think they can eliminate 75 million, 10% of their stores, their inventory, by going direct to print. Right? This is a huge deal. Now, what I say to Ford in a kidding way is how quaint. You put in 35 printers. They think it's like world leading. We have 35 printers in this facility. And we're like, we have 300. Right? That's the point. The point I'm trying to drive home, even to the very bigs, is you can't compete with the scale. Because the littles can be just as smart as you. In other words, someone at Ford pushes a button and it prints out in the Ford print room. Who cares? I can print a button and it can print out in Madison Heights, and then I can drop it off to Ford. Or it can print out in Royal Oak, or it can print out in Lansing, or it can print out in Grand Rapids. It just doesn't matter. And that's the point, because when I finish the Ford part, the very next part, I could build a Stryker something. I could build a Meyer part for one of their stores. I could build whatever. And that's why this is a fool's errand. This is a manufacturer who thinks the value is in the assets that we have, not the IP that we own. And what we're trying to say is the assets are irrelevant, insignificant. In fact, you're going to bankrupt yourself trying to keep up. What you want to do is own the IP and figure out how can I print it at your facility and not have you steal it from me. That's the issue. If I can solve that problem through digital IDs and tokens and things that we have in other parts of society, like our licenses, we can do that. Okay, let's keep going. How much time?
Got 3 minutes.
Okay, we're gonna fly through. Here's an example of Coke. So they came out with this flavor that AI created. They asked AI a whole bunch of questions, and AI said, here's the recipe for this flavor. And they were pretty successful with it. They called it the Y3000. And I was at a food processing conference when I first put this slide up. I kept it in because I put this up because I said, for everybody in the room, personally, you can shoot me, but I think Coke missed the boat. Who cares about a flavor for the masses? What you should have done is, Coke is moving from a canned model to a distributed model, right? You go into a store and you go over to the Coke machine and you make up any darn flavor you want. And they're in the components business. They ship the syrups, and then they have this machine that can make anything. And what I said was, why didn't you use AI to build a nice front end to your website that says, hey, come to my website, answer a bunch of questions, and we'll give you a code for a unique flavor that can only be made in our Coke machine. And by the way, if you like it, if it works out, share it with all your friends on social media, and we'll give them the code. And they can then go and use our Coke machine and make that flavor. And guess what? Pepsi can't steal it. Because Pepsi doesn't know what that code is. Right? Only Coke knows what that code is. This is what happens when you unleash from saying we're in the manufacture of Coke products at a major factory where we ship out one flavor to the world, to saying AI and digital IP and digital manufacturing creates a world where I can do finally I can achieve the goal of mass customization. So that Chris has his flavor, and you have your flavor, and you have your flavor, and you don't even know what it is, but you know you like it. Right? And by the way, if you're a social media influencer, now all of a sudden, you're both winning. Because you're creating flavors, and people are like, I gotta go try his flavor. Oh my God, Mr. Beast, I gotta go see what he's drinking. Right? Millions of dollars to be made. I hope they do that, because that's what we're talking about. Next slide. So, last slide. Now, with everything that I just said, the one caveat I'm going to say is, if you're in the manufacturing business, this has always been the lifeblood of manufacturing. You have to figure out, where am I on my own risk curve? If I'm here, I don't want to put any money in. I just want to observe the world, because I'll go bankrupt. Because the world won't be ready for me. If I'm here, I might be too late. Because I won't be able to spend and learn fast enough, and the market will leave without me. That's always been the world we live in. Especially true when you deal in cycles in technology, right? It used to be that technology was a tool that acted on manufacturing, and so you had time because you owned the process know-how. Therefore, everything else was just a tool that you used. And now it's moving from the tool to the business model. And it's happening. I'm a manufacturing expert. I'm here to tell you that it's happening in every single industry. I hope that no matter what industry you're in, you're listening to this and you're going, well, that would apply to my industry. Because it's all the same. So you all have to pay attention because it is existential to all of us. If you're in the business, it's actually wildly opportunistic. If you are a young kid in college today and want to come out and be a little disruptive, they are the digital natives of the world, and they're coming for your lunch. Because they're not going to be patient and wait for you to figure it out. You're just going to go do it. So thank you for your time today. I really appreciated being here. And Chris, thank you.
So as I'm sitting here, I'm thinking convergence, you're going to get real busy doing the firewalls and everything that people he's created need. Anybody have any questions? We've got time for one. Jamie? We'll get to you.
Okay.
This is actually Cindy Kangas.
she
She left me questions, and they're very good.
Okay.
So, these are Cindy Kangas questions. Why is it 4.0, what were
Okay.
1 through 3, and what is 5?
Yeah, great question. I'll answer that real quick. So Industry 4.0 is just a euphemism for the fourth industrial revolution. So the first was the steam engine. It changed the way work was done. Once you could start moving goods with a machine rather than horses, and you could go long distances, it changed everything we knew about manufacturing. You could manufacture one place, ship the goods somewhere else, right? Industry 2.0, Michigan owned, it was the assembly line. And electricity actually kind of came together at the same time. And it changed manufacturing. And Detroit at one time was the richest city in the world. And we were by far the #1 manufacturing entity in the world. That was 2.0. 3.0 was computers and robotics. And because computers and robotics was still a tool acting on the business, we were still able to maintain our lead because of that. It acted on 2.0. 4.0 is the digitization of everything. It's the fourth industrial revolution. You hear this term all over the world. The fourth industrial revolution. And this is the one where Michigan is uniquely unprepared for the fourth industrial revolution. Why? Because all our assets were invested in 2 and 3. All of our assets are in 2 and 3. What does that mean? We want to resist the change because it's very, very, very painful. Right? I don't want to destroy what I have. I just want to build on top. Can't we just build on top? And the problem is we don't have that luxury. We need to destroy and recreate the same as everybody else. And we're unwilling to do that.
Okay, there was a second.
Yeah, I got a question. So I know you mentioned about AI and how it's almost revolutionizing the world. Are we supposed to be scared of AI, number one? I'm not, but I'm asking this for the general public. And the second part is this: we know now we are, initially it was input-output AI, now it is like generative AI that you explained. So do you think generative AI would be making decisions based off the information that we have provided, or still the human would have a control on those decisions that generative AI is making?
Yeah, so I'll take those in 2 parts. So one, I don't know if AI will destroy the world. That's above my pay grade, right? Other people are working on their problem. And we're not going to talk about that. 2, generally people fear AI because they think it's coming for my job. And so they're very fearful. They're like, wait a minute, I don't want this accelerated decision making because then it means I'm not necessary. I do not buy that at all. I believe humans are infinitely creative and there's infinite work to be done. And therefore, there will always be, let me give you an example. First, second, and third industrial revolutions. Massive, massive, massive disruptions. We exist today at this moment in time where we are desperate for people to work. We don't have enough people to do the work. How did that happen? We should have people everywhere because the technology should have displaced everybody, right? We should be sitting on a beach, all rich, and we're not. So AI is going to transform everything, but it's also going to be the most liberating, and we're going to reach a world of abundance. I totally believe that. Energy is just one of the equations. Energy is going to be free. Maybe not in my lifetime, but maybe in the next lifetime. What does that mean? Energy will be decarbonized. What does that mean? And on and on and on. Medicine, things, all these things. We're going to create huge abundance. And we just have to figure out how to take care of the dislocations as they occur. But humans are infinitely creative, and there's infinite work to be done.
Excellent. We have one more question, man.
Yeah, with the cost of admission on 3D printing and the learning curve changing as fast as the technology, do you see a time when I'll have my own 3D printing farm that I just, in an Uber style, contact Ford and say, hey, by the way, if you need a part made in Saginaw County, I've signed up for your service and now I'm printing for you.
Yeah, but I would caution you against the printer farm. What I would say is I just need a printer and I need to be on a network like Project Diamond. Because if I need to make 2 of them at a time, I'll use my buddy. And we'll both share the margin. Because the cost of the printer, once you buy your printers, you're now captive to keep them running 80% of the time, or you lose money.
Sure.
And you're chasing your own tail, and it's depressing. It's like, how do you keep up with that? In a world where cost is going like this, and you bought here, and next year the printer's here, and you're out of business, and the next guy buys here, and the next year he's out of business. It's like, you can't keep up with the pace of technology. That's why I said it's an IP game. If you have something Ford wants, if you can protect it, you want to make 10,000 at a time, as quick as you can, because those 10,000, you have to iterate yourself to the next phase, or someone else is going to iterate and get the next 10,000. You see what I mean? So I would say, yes, get on Project Diamond and get on the network, but don't ever buy more than the printers you need to make profit yourself, because that's the fool's errand. That, again, the thought that it's the physical thing that creates value. It's not. It's your brain that creates value.
You want to make the file, not the part.
Yeah, own the file, own the file, own the file.
There you go.
And
Tom, thanks so much. Oh,
Project Diamond, you had that announcement at Mackinac, and I know you have a few more slides that are related to that. Did you care to share those with our audience?
I think we're out of time, but please come to automationearly.com.
No,
Project
We've
Diamond.
got till 10
we're
after.
not out of time.
Okay, well, then very, very quickly. So we stood up today. One of the things we've been doing with Project Diamond, we have 300 manufacturers now, on our way to 700. By the way, this is a multi-tens of $1 million initiative. This isn't a fly-by-night initiative. It's a very, very well-funded initiative by Oakland, Macomb, Wayne County. The governor's office just announced they want to bring it to the entire state. It's public. Stay tuned. We haven't figured out how to get it around to the state. But the idea is to build hub-and-spoke models where you have a hub of a centralized center where you have very sophisticated 3D printing capabilities that no one manufacturer should own on their own or could own on their own, especially if you're small, right? If you have a $2 million 3D printer and you're a $10 million manufacturer, that's an awful hard equation to go by, right? Maybe you're a $1 million manufacturer, right? So we just announced today that we have opened our digital transformation center, we call it, in Auburn Hills. And that is made up of high-end sophisticated printers that can compete with injection molding companies. So that little companies can bid on an injection molding contract and then just rent the machine when they need it. Because they might have an IP on a part that used to have to be injection molded because you had to build a mold. And you say, no, I don't need a mold anymore. I just need to make that innovation. And now I can print tens of thousands of them a month using Automation Alley's machines because they're all part of the network. And we just, as a nonprofit, we just take our costs. Just the cost that you would have had to bear by owning the machine yourself. We think this is a winning model for society. That's why we're doing it. And so our 300 manufacturers are all able to use those assets. Now we want to stand up a DTC in Macomb, and a DTC in Wayne, and a DTC in Lansing, right? And by the way, the DTC in Lansing, it may have assets that are uniquely capable for the farm industry, let's say, right? And we don't need those in Southeast Michigan, but you need them there. But guess what? Because it's all digital, if at some point there's some farmer in Macomb going, hey, I need this part made, they have that IP on file in Lansing. I'll just have them make it. They can FedEx it to me the next day. Do you see where we're going with this? And this is why we think this is so transformative. This allows small manufacturers to behave like really, really big manufacturers. And by the way, we're in conversations with all the OEs because they want this to occur too. The OEs want the innovation. They're in a dogfight with BYD and every other automotive company coming out of China. Their attitude has changed. They're not like, hey, we got to own this. They're like, please help. Please help us before we go bankrupt. Right? 3 minutes? Yeah. Why is it always 3 minutes? Don't you guys ever run out of minutes?
We have one of those times.
The kids going over. Well, hopefully this was fun for you guys. I love talking. It was fun for me. So,
It was, I tell you what, it was great stuff. And you say why we had Tom out here. He made the first of a kind announcement here as he's making it in Detroit. So that's something unique, right?
yeah. Well, I still have to answer to the press for why I'm actually not in my own event. So I committed, I picked the.
I'll write you a note.
2 seconds, may I? Defense sector of the U.S. Where is Automation Alley and the U.S. Centers for Advanced Manufacturing at for getting them aware of the opportunities of Project Diamond?
That's a great question. So Eric Schmidt is the former CEO of Google. Thanks for this. You set me up too well. He has a think tank in D.C. called the Special Competitive Studies Project. It's the second one that's called the Special Competitive. The first one was stood up by Henry Kissinger, and it was after the dawn of the race between the USSR and the United States and nuclear weapons. They said, we need a commission to figure out how do we actually handle this pacing threat? Because we need to figure out professional ways to handle this without blowing ourselves up, right? And so that was the Special Competitive Studies Project. That was secret at the time, but now it's public. Well, this one is public. It's set up by Eric Schmidt. They said, what are the things we need to do as a country to make sure that our manufacturing prowess comes back to America? Because the pacing threat is China. How do we make sure we compete in a new world where we are not the dominant manufacturing force? It's a very scary thought, actually. And so they came out with a report. And in that report, they had 5 or 6 things that they said America needs to do. We need to dominate space. We need to build an autonomous shipbuilding yard in Virginia that just kicks out ships day after day, autonomously with no people in it, right? And all these far-reaching things. They said we need to build a national additive manufacturing distributed network modeled exactly like Project Diamond. That was awesome. We did not put them up to that. That was awesome. And so now we're in talks with the Defense Department to say, how do we figure out how to make this network real for the Department of Defense? By the way, it's not easy. You talk about culture change in business, right? That's child's play compared to culture change at the Department of Defense. We don't know if we'll be successful, but we just keep moving the ball. Because we're a nonprofit. We only have one thing in mind, and that's to make sure Michigan kicks ass on the global stage and takes names. That's our number one mission.
And thank you for that. John Kelly, appreciate it. All right, so I got a, Tom, thanks so much for bringing that. It really is crucial, and thank you for your message, your time, all that stuff. If there's a question you think of later that you want, you get it to our people, our website, and we'll get it to Tom's people, and we'll get an answer for you. Tanya Sunderman, you have won the $100 gift certificate to Douglas J. You can come up and get it afterwards. Yeah. And Chaz Grillo, you won the foursome to the Majestic. So come up and see me afterwards. All right, so once again, these events don't happen without our sponsors. Let me run down them, please, because they're crucial to this. Dean Transportation, Shaheen Chevrolet and Cadillac Sinair, Fly Lansing, Capital Region International Airport, which in case you didn't notice is where you are. LAFQ and TriStar Trust Bank. So, and I also really want to thank my team, Sarah Mosher, Benjamin Robinson, Caitlin Mosher, and Jeffrey Mosher. Yes, there is some nepotism involved. And thank you once again to all of you for coming out and supporting this MBN Speaker Series. Our next events will be our 2024 Fall Business Sports Luncheon on October 8th. So you want to put that with Howdy Holmes. I don't know how many of you know Howdy Holmes, but at one time he was the hottest driver in the open wheeler circuit. And he also is the CEO of Jiffy Mix. And his story is really enamoring. Unfortunate how he happens to be a friend. So I've heard it a few times, and it's just really going to be great to share. And then on November 7th, we'll have Todd McCracken come in. He's the CEO of the National Small Business Association. And he always brings that inside the Capitol Hill. And so you can see not only things that are going to impact you that are going into law, but you can see things that are in committee that we need to step on before they get out of committee. So don't forget about the quick survey that's on your table that relates to our events. That helps us get a little better. And if you didn't pick up your parking voucher on the way out, grab one. Meanwhile, we built in some more networking time, so if you want to hang around. Thank you all for being here, and as always, we wish all of you a very prosperous life. Thank you.